this is kind of a fun topic for me because it's really kind of in depth, right? It takes a lot of you're like unpeeling this onion, right? The whole time you're kind of performance testing, you're crying the whole time. It's so freaking ridiculously difficult. And you're like, you're throwing in a bunch of different directions, right? So I think that's why I kind of take to it, right? It's have fun. And it's challenging, and there's a lot of, there's a lot of information out there that'll help you, but it's really fun when you talk to the guys that really know what they're talking about, and you just like, Mario and I would listen to this guy, his name's Ken Kilty, and Greg too, right? This guy is like up here. He's a performance engineer. He knows what he's talking about. He's a very, very smart guy. But it's like, it makes you want to do this stuff, right? It makes you want to like learn a lot more about it, get dorking out about stuff, dorking out about, it's, low-level.NET stuff. A lot of fun. So that's why I decided, I was like, well, I'll just give a presentation about it, about my experiences. I'm not a performance engineer, but this stuff is a lot of fun. So I'm hoping that you guys can just get a little more information about it, right? So you can take away from this presentation, try stuff in your applications and see how it runs. So I'm gonna go over some tooling, some performance, kind of like how-tos, like some philosophies in the beginning, right? Some tooling, some options there, and then what's new in Visual Studio, and then in 2015, and then some resources, right? So that's where it's at, really. The resources, you gotta see and do this stuff a lot over and over again to try, to get good at it and master that concept. So I've got some really good stuff for you guys to look at. All right, so I'll start with some initial thoughts. So how do you guys know that your applications run well? Like, that's the question. Like, anybody? That's one. I guess. You don't want to open that door.
WTFs per minute. User.
Yeah, you can measure that. Maybe not.
That depends on the problem.
Right. Right. So what's that?
Good enough.
Right. So yeah. So like a lot of times you don't know how responsive or how your application runs without actually putting some instrumentation behind it or measuring it, right? And you don't know if that's good or bad unless you set goals for yourself. So a lot about what makes a successful kind of performance test or application metrics for you is that you have a plan and you identify what are going to be your expected responses and you go think about the action that you would be doing. Think about the actions that might be on that you would want to measure, right? And what makes sense for you to measure and have like at a we call it like a 1x, right? What's a 1x, right? How long do you think it's going to take? And then you want to see how many users are going to be doing that action and how what's the response time going to be, right? And then you can multiply that, right? And that's your 2x and so on and so forth. I'm paraphrasing that a little bit. That's maybe a strategy for how you would performance test in your environment, but how you'd measure your goals. But there's many different schools of thought there, but I'm going to show you the tools that help you get there. And then another question, who's done like performance testing on some level before, like in the applications? And it's okay to not raise your hand. What kinds of things have you guys done? Throw them out there.
Primarily front-end user tests to see page load.
Okay, cool. Okay. Can you explain a little bit about that too? Just like generally.
Yeah. What we're looking for is how many transactions per second before requests of a duration we're trying to find breaking points to kind of scale that.
Cool. All right. Excellent. Well, a lot of it boils down to this doctor-patient like syndrome kind of thing, right? That's what I'm calling it. And have you ever guys go to the doctor, and I know I do this, I go to the doctor and I say, my throat doesn't, it's kind of weird, my throat. I feel like this weird sensation, And he inquires more, right? And inquires more. Well, maybe first off I say, like, I don't feel good, right? And then he's like, okay, where does it hurt? So we kind of drill down, right? That's a lot of times what you need to do in performance analysis, right? As you gain this general oversight of how maybe the machine's running, you pare it down to your application and your code, right? And then you start understanding the metrics that you need to be capturing in your code or in your application, and then it kind of just helps drive the process. And I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you tools that help you get there, right? So when we as consultants are the doctors and the our clients or the patients, right? We need to be asking those kind of the question. Maybe you'll start thinking about some of the questions you'll ask tonight, right, to help get you there. So, alrighty. So let's look at some tools. And really, it's kind of funny. I think Ken has this mantra. He says, "The uglier the tool is, the more usefulness in the performance realm it's going to have." So. And I'm going to show you some pretty ugly tools. So I hope you guys find they're useful, and I'll give you the links to download them too. They're all free. So nothing I'm showing you is like stuff you can't get. But really, I'm no expert in this area. I find it very fascinating, and it takes a long time to understand what you're looking at in performance. Because it's very easy to like misjudge something, right? It's very easy to think you have a CPU problem when you might have a disk problem, right? And you got to look at all of the numbers, right? Kind of, and there's the tools will help you kind of understand. Use a combination of tools to help you get there, right? And then when you can't get there, there's some really low-level tools that really help you out, right? So. Got to think out of the box. You got to try to get. You got to try to get into the right box, right? You whittle down the amount of boxes you have.
What's that at the end?
Or break out of more boxes. What?
Sampling and glittering.
And oh shoot, I left that out. I know what that's supposed to be though. But hold on.
You didn't analyze the performance of your slide thing?
Yeah. But really, through the tools that I'm going to show you, you're going to pick a process, and you can pick a process out here that will work for you, right? One of the things I wanted to talk about beforehand, before we get into some of this, is a couple of ways that some of the tools gather information, right? One of them is sampling. So sampling is like you take a lot of looks at how the CPU is the metrics of the CPU, right? And you take those over an interval, and you'll see some of the tools, right, that show this really well. And so it's like you're trying to get statistical analysis on how that CPU is behaving over time, right? But you're also, if you're thinking in statistics world, you're removing the outliers that might be not necessarily, some of these tools will remove the outliers for you, right? So that's the idea there behind that sampling. And then there's the other one is instrumentational, right? So, and I'm going to show you this in Visual Studio, some of the tools. Those will actually kind of think of them as like methods that are called before and after your function, right? And then they can measure the output or measure the performance of that function, right? And they'll do it on a larger scale throughout your app, right? So there are good and bad things to both of those, right? So the way that you measure those, some of those have impact on performance. It may cause other kind of issues when looking at your reports, right? So you need to think that process through what type of gathering that you want to do on your application. A lot of these you'll see that I'm using sampling, right? And I've got a couple of ways I show you, like instrumentational kind of things, right? So and then I can show you in 2015. Yeah, I'm gonna show you one thing that's not in 2015 right now, and then in 2015 how they account for instrumentation, maybe producing like a not so accurate number. Alrighty, So enough talk. I'm going to show you Performance Monitor. So this is PerfMon. Have you guys, who's heard of PerfMon before? This is an amazing tool, and it's not just limited to, it shows information about all processes running on the computer. It's an amazing, awesome tool. And it's really good as consultants, and if you're doing, like we have managed support contracts for .NET apps right now, right? We might be in the business of understanding these a little bit more and being able to, diagnose problems or issues through using PerfMon. So this is, to me, a really important, good starting place, right? And it's really easy to get to. Start, run PerfMon. So you can capture real-time or capture-based, like time to time, right? Because you say start and then stop, right? And that'll give you the information you care about, right? In that start and stop period. Or real time, the information you care about, right? So you can have it stream. I'll show all this. There's the main thing that you're working with here is a data collector set, right? So a data collector set has quite a bit of info in it, right? So it captures, it has performance counter information in it. So if we want to understand how a process's CPU is impacted or impacting the CPU, how many memory bytes in memory are allocated, large object size, network traffic. We get really detailed real quick, and best way is to show that. Event trace data. So this is like low level ETW data, right? So it's event tracing for Windows, right? So this is a real like OS developer level metric to be able to debug the OS, right? So one way to think about it is if you're in Google Chrome, right, and you're playing music, and you start scrolling the scroll bar, and then all of a sudden like the music starts skipping, how the hell would you debug that, right? Well, ETW, these logs, that's what you would look at to figure out that skipping, right? So you can even do that in PerfMon. You can look at that in PerfMon. And then lastly, if you're looking at debugging information about the registry, you've got configuration information there that you can look and see, like maybe when values change in the registry. So it's very versatile. It's a very good way to debug and look at the first point where your process is erring. Two more points is that there's another tool. It's called Resource Monitor. It's very closely paired with PerfMon, but it's not historical data. Because PerfMon can do historical data, right? Like captures that you can look at and send them to people. Resource Monitor is going to be everything from like this point forward, right? And you're looking at live data coming in and out, and I'll show you that. Lastly, it's non-intrusive. So really, you say if you want to debug a performance issue with somebody, you can say, hey, run this XML file, create a data collector set out of this XML file, and then instructions, right? Start collecting, do something, stop collecting, and then that output can be sent to you, and you can look and see what happened during that. And it'll give you just a general look at how the application is performing on the different performance counters. All right, so I'm going to show you this. Okay, so I figured I would run it like this, right? Oh, hold on. Okay, so I was going to do start run perfmon, but I guess I'm not going to. So start run perfmon. I'm at the perfmon screen. Right away, you can see open resource monitor. I'm going to do that after the fact. But over on my left-hand side, I've got data collector sets. That's where I'm going to start. And you have user defined. So you can, create a new data collector set here. But I'm not going to go through the process of creating this one. I want to show off the one that I have. It's the options that I'm going to go through in my current one are going to be very similar to how you create one. I have the same kind of options, right? I guess it would be helpful if I showed you this blowout application. It's so dumb. It's like this dumb little app that I wrote. I was like, I completely admit this. Okay, this is where I need to change my, is it customized? Is that right? For the, oh no, it's options, light theme. Yeah, that's right. This is like the dumbest app. You never do this, right? So I'm like doing work, I'm sleeping, and I have throwing a new exception, right? I just want to show you what this might, like if I'm not, if I, through my program flow, I'm throwing exceptions, that's bad, right? So maybe somehow I'm throwing an exception here in my application and I just don't know it, right? I might be completely oblivious to this. Well, we actually found this in one of the applications. It wasn't that we were like routing our application through throwing exceptions or anything. It was like we were calling a database and it was throwing an exception and we had no idea. So there was like all these exceptions piling up and it was slowing down our app, right? Well, how I could see this is in Perfbot, I would define a data collector set. Actually, why don't I just do this super quick, right? You get blowout 2. It's just like we had a blowout, right? I don't know. Something's not working right. Yeah. It's dumb. It's like, yeah, it's not Jersey Shore or anything, but.
I like how you're meant to do work just doing nothing to sleep. Sleeping on the
I didn't think about that. I guess that's right. That's my secret. All right, so I can create it manually or from a template. So think that from the template, right? I'm sending somebody an XML file and say create a data collector set based on that XML file, right? So I'm gonna round that corner. We'll circle back to that in a minute. So I can say what I want to capture. I usually capture everything, but you can choose which ones you want to actually, what matters to you, right? So you can set alerts. So think thresholds, right? So when something goes above, I can actually run into that one if we want, but you can set thresholds for certain counters. I'm going to add a performance counter. This is a pretty common screen you'll be at when you're adding performance counters to check what's going on. But you see there's a lot of counters here, right? So you see there's a lot of CLR like JIT and GC and memory, networking, all this stuff, exceptions. So when you open up this guy, he's going to have more things that you can view on this, ultimately on this graph, right? And what I really care about, I'm just going to do a couple here, is exceptions, the number of exceptions and exceptions shown per second. And below here are the services running that I can attach, or I can monitor these counters on. So my blowout app, I'm gonna put that on, and then I can add these over. I could additionally say, and this is the actual, like my first blowout one, I could say, give me everything and all of these, right? So I can get like, I can over capture, and then I can whittle everything down if I want. You'll see in the UI how I do that. I'm just gonna select these couple of things. And the sampling interval, that's how often I'm gonna see change, right? So, whatever you want here, right? I think there's a method to this madness, but I think it might depend on which counters you choose. That's one I will happily admit I need to look at. But after this, just finish. We've got our blowout 2. I can start both of these. Oh, I can't start both of these. Never mind. I thought I could. And then I'm going to run my blowout. I've got this is not as cool of one to look at just yet. I think I have a cooler one in the future in a subsequent demo. Oh, you didn't see what it's doing. It's blowing out on my screen over here. Sleeping and all kinds of stuff. Okay, so then after that, I can tell it stop collecting. So that one is in, oh boy. Data collector, oh no. I want in 0409. So here's your graph that's real time. You can see all these counters on the bottom. There'll be a lot here. What it starts out with is percentage processor time over everything, right? I'm gonna clear these counters, remove all counters. I can now up here choose my data collector, and I could say current activity, log files, database. I haven't tried that yet. That would be interesting. But I'm going to go up to 409. This is the capture that I just took. We'll click OK. It's not gonna. You know what? I'm just gonna. Of course, I'm just gonna go to the one that I already created for you guys. What that? I think it's this guy. Let me make sure. But this was the other blowout file. And I don't have any counters here yet because I removed everything. Otherwise, it would have shown like the processor time here. I'm going to add counters. And these are the ones that I chose originally, right, when I went through the new data collector set. And see, I've got these two, right? I can say which instances I care about, right, from when this ran, right? So I would see at the time that I ran this, the instances over here. But I can cheat and take everything. All of those categories and all of the instances. And it doesn't look beautiful. Okay, so this makes really it's difficult to look at, right? So what I care about is this. I can zoom. Something doesn't look right, right? And you can probably guess which one. You know, maybe. But I can click this highlight tool, and it tells me which things are, you know, when I select a counter down here, it's going to highlight the graph, right? Now, important thing to look at, right? The counter and the instance. So right now I'm looking at this odd one I don't really care about, right? If I scroll, oh boy, what am I sorting by here? Let me sort by instance and then look at blowout. Blowout, yeah, here we go. Okay, so I was throwing exceptions, right? So I might see now my exceptions over the time that I'm, you know, running this process or application is going to grow. I've got a problem. Something's wrong, right? So I can't tell what exceptions these are right now without inspecting, doing like memory dumps, right? And looking at point in time what the difference between those two memory dumps are and what might be causing those exceptions, right? So just to call out, this is going to point me in the direction though that I need to use a memory dump to kind of, you know, and analyze what's going on here. What's in memory when I'm getting this exception? And you can see the actual exception. So I'll tell you which tool you can do to get the memory dump and inspect it later. And then you know, maybe I can look at processor, right? Oh, it's low, so I don't really, you know, I might not have a processor issue. I'm not, right? So you can infer some things here, but it'll help point out some issues pretty apparently. So that's Perfmon. There's so much. I'm scratching the surface here because you can export this data to CSV and do Excel on this and get boatloads more information and analyze it even more in depth. So this is a start. This is a scratching the surface kind of thing of this. So you want to try that out. You can go home today and look at this. Try this. You just run Perfmon. You can see how what's running on your PC and all that stuff. Let me see if I can I select all these and then, oh, I can't. Greg, do you know if there's a way I can select all these and, well, yeah, it didn't work. Hide. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thanks. I did ask a question pretty bad. I know. I do that to you, Greg. I know. Stop. So I'm going to select these, my blowout instance, and then I can, oh, I'm missing one. Oops. And then I can say up here, I want to go current activity. There's nothing going on, right? Well, if I run my app, it's running in the background here. Oh my gosh. Oh. That's pretty cool, I think, right? You can kind of see some stuff real time, and then the graph looked a little different. But you know what? One of the things you kind of have to do when you're running this tool is you can select the counters, right? And then scale selected, and it helps you figure out, kind of helps you figure out relative to some of these other ones what you're looking at. Wow, not highlighting it. So, but anybody have any questions about this? Perfmon? Okay. You can ask questions and whatever during the time. You know, don't. You know.
No, you said your counters. You had to set those up beforehand. You can't
Yeah.
just monitor and then grab which counter you want to see later.
Okay, so good question, because you want to actually choose the counter. You don't want to monitor across all counters, right? Because there's a lot of counters.
Yeah.
You want to choose the counters that are applicable to the type of app.
Yeah. Okay. So you're
Yeah.
only setting up ahead of time.
Yeah.
So, okay. Not after the fact.
Right. So resource monitor. This is a pretty cool, like, just quick look at how your application, right? And I'm going to really quickly go through this because what do I have till like what 6:30? Yeah. So I can see all the processes running on the computer right now, and I can select one up here, and I can see, let's say Chrome, right? I can see the disk I/O, like maybe some handles and stuff it has, the network. I can see, inbound, outbound, memory. There's not much there right here. Okay. See, in orange is what I've selected. So that'll help, just look. You can cycle through these. Each one has its own more in-depth information. Run your app. Check out Resource Monitor. It's kind of cool. I was doing something the other day on network, and I was trying to do a lot of HTTP calls at once, right? And I was getting throttled to like 2, right? And I didn't quite understand why, right? So I went into Resource Monitor. I was just watching my application. I was like, just 2. And then I kept, looking it up. Why am I only like limited at 2, right? I found the setting that I needed to change, and I saw it I could see it kind of opening up, So interesting stuff to look at. Can help you kind of just give some insight into how your process is running. Any questions so far? All right.
How do you get Resource Monitor?
Okay, you can type in Resource Monitor on Windows 7, right? Yeah, or I'm sure you can get a run Resource Monitor. If you type in Perfmon, the start screen of Perfmon has a link to Resource Monitor.
I see.
No problem. So a lot of times, like when you look at Perfmon, oh my gosh, there's so many things, like tools wise. There's so many like names for all these things, right? So you get these like stuck up in your head. When you look at Perfmon, sometimes it's difficult to see like thresholds and what's good or bad, right? And there's this tool called PAL. It's a performance analysis of logs, right? You can run PAL against your VLG file that was created from your data collector set, and it'll give you recommendations, I think is the right word, right? And you don't have to follow all these recommendations because some of them might be subjected to what was going on at that time, right? So you need to take like multiple different perfmon data sets and run them through PAL, and you need to, you need to get an aggregate of all this that can help you make a decision where you have an issue, right? It does some really cool things. So it helps you, it generates this report. I'm going to show you a sample report you can generate through PAL that just gives you some recommendations. And we'll see what some of those recommendations look like. And then what's really nice is you talked about, Wes, about the performance counters. Which ones do I choose, right? Do I do them all? Well, it can give you some helpful starting points, right? So you can export what a profile of, it's even got SharePoint in there, a profile of what SharePoint performance counters you might want, right? And it'll give you that, so that's nice. And then, yeah, so let's just look at it. So PAL is our PAL. It's an ugly looking tool, so it's pretty good. It's a good one. You can go download it on Codeplex, pal.codeplex.com. So where do you start again? You go, okay, so here's where you can choose your, hold on a sec. Okay. I've used this a couple of times, but mostly I've done the tutorial where it helps you generate the report. So you can generate your template file like I was talking about. You can choose between these different types of performance counter files that would help you kind of narrow down what you may be trying to troubleshoot, right? So just to note, some of these are like ASP.NET, right? So it'll have specific counters for that. Exchange, link server, SharePoint, SQL. System overview, right? So different kinds here. Now, if I saved one to my desktop, I believe. Yeah, I did. These counter files look like, these template files look like this, right? A list of counters. Now, this one doesn't have any thresholds in it, so the thresholds as I understand it are if a certain counter hits this threshold, do an action, right? Perform an action. But this is what you would send to a client. Say, hey, I want to, and you can change this from 2.0 to 4.0, right? As long as that matches what a counter title. This is just a template, right? You can add counters in here, right? Send these to a client, run this, steps to create the BLG file, and then run data collector set, and you can gather that info, right? For your guys' info, if you double click on a BLG file, which is the output from Perfmon, it'll give you that graph, right? That you can then roll down the information. Okay, so anyway, you can generate those, and then through that interface, you can examine a BLG file. And let me find my. This is a little awkward looking at. This is the output. This is PAL's output is this generated report. And it'll give you some alerts here. It's going to look at logical disk, memory, network interface, physical disk, processor, all kinds of stuff. And I believe these are errors and warnings. We can look at one of these, right? So percentage processor time. So give you kind of an idea, right? In the red, yellow, error warning, just level of error, critical, right? And you can look at these there's a ton of information here, right? It'll give you an idea of more than 80% processor utilization. And, that's you got to take that with a grain of salt, right? So I think that's a useful thing to look at. You need to, it's like statistics. We need to find a mean or understand when was this ran, right? Was it during peak time? Is that, an average over time? Think about that kind of stuff. Let me scroll around here just a little bit so you can see kind of what kind of stuff is in here. Let me go up to the top. What?
Question on everyone's mind is who's Zach?
Zach's I don't know actually who Zach is. But it's the guy's computer. Did you see Zach PC?
I thought you used this on
No, unless Nationwide has Zach PC. No, I didn't do that on theirs. But just something to think about when you analyze these files. These are samplings, right? Across, yeah. So you can see, you can investigate each one of these things. increasing trend of more than 100 handles per hour. This is on, I think, on a process, right? Is that what we were looking at? There's so much crap, right? You've got to look. I mean, this takes a long time to analyze and understand if you have a problem, right? And you have to use a lot of different tools to help you gather that if there is that problem, right? So don't see red and go, oh crap, I've done something wrong, you know. Just take it into take it under a consideration. Any questions on PAL? Okay. So this is one of those like instrumentation type of captures that you can use, and this is very like, you know, this is a code level thing that you can do, right? The system.diagnosis.stopwatch, and this actually underneath the covers uses ETW, which is what the same things that Perfmon uses, really underneath the hood, right? So it's very, they call it high resolution, right? So you're going to get, when you start and stop these things, you're going to get very accurate times, right? So this is a very nice way in code. And this is, again, think of it's like, it might not be the right analogy, but if you say like, it's like the Schrodinger's cat, right? You've opened up the box, so now the results may have changed. Well, I've added, you know, a stopwatch into my code to measure performance. Have my performance numbers changed? So that's could be, you know, may have some issues, right? Now, if you look, there's some good posts about the stopwatch, right, and performance of stopwatch, right? So for things like in a tight loop, right, where there's not a lot of like instructions in the loop, that's not a good thing to start and stop a stopwatch right in there, right? Because the act of starting and stopping it might cause more overhead than what you're trying to actually measure, right? So just have that under consideration. But this is a interesting way, like when we talked about our Azure, we had an Azure talk, I think it was Monday, I think. It's all running together. This is a nice way when you have third-party dependencies or other dependencies. Maybe you're saving changes in a database, or you're going out to Twitter, right? Capture the time that it took, right? See if you have an issue. Then you can. This is a nice way to create a benchmark, right? Make that call 10,000 times. What's the mean of that, and see, you know, if that's performant, right? This gets better in Visual Studio 2015, and I'll show you that. Okay, so if you have Visual Studio Ultimate, there's the Visual Studio Profiler, and this is a pretty nice tooling. It's pretty nice tooling inside of Visual Studio. And this is, I wanted to show you this, but I don't have Ultimate on my home PC, so I need to bring this other PC in. But what's nice about the profiler is it's got a wizard kind of feel to it, and I wouldn't take that negatively, right? There's a lot of options for setting up a profile, right, and then getting a report from that, and then diving into the report. So I've created a better app than Blowout. This is one that I'm going to have to show up there. It's called Perf Test, and or probably not Hangout share because I consider it a time. Oh, son of a. Oops. Oh yeah, no, I'm in the right spot. One of the there's a couple of prerequisites to actually running the profile if you want to capture a accurate test, is that you need to have you need to set up symbols, right? You need to download the Windows symbols that your application is going to be using, so that you can actually view you can actually get a call tree, right? You can actually see they call this the hot path, and this hot path says where are the areas of my application that are taking the most samples, right? So if I'm doing encryption and decryption, the hot path is going to be right to the encryption and decryption methods, right? Because that's where most of the samples are getting collected, right? When the CPU is running, it's going to see, oh, I'm churning on encrypting or decrypting a lot, and when the samples hit, I'm like doing those operations. So let me show you what this actually looks like, and let me show you the code. So I've got a for loop that I was just messing around with stuff. I was sleeping at first, and I'm doing work at the same time, and bad joke, sorry. And I've got a byte array that I'm that I'm gonna encrypt and decrypt, okay? And this is not like crazy fast, right? Because I'm doing like in, I think, AES 256, you know, this is a sample I grabbed off the internet real quick, right? But I'm gonna also more bytes per iteration of this for loop. So it's gonna go slower and slower. You know, it's something to show the tooling, right? It's fun to write crappy code. But this is a console application, right? So it has a very easy target, right? So, and it has a definitive start and stop. So that this, just as a heads up, it's very easy to run this and see start and stop. How long did it take? And you know, sometimes it's not so apparent, right? Like you might need to capture a button click on a web application that doesn't have a definitive end time, right? You can do that with this the profiler. But underneath the analyze dropdown, if you have ultimate again, we can hit performance and diagnostics. And for my application, I have a couple of options: GPU and performance wizard. And I believe GPU is for Windows store apps and maybe WPF apps for like XAML based stuff. There was actually a good demo on that part of, I think it was Connect. Was it that 2-day conference on Channel 9, right? The guys were showing the new Perf tools, and they were showing how it did with WPF. But this is only going to get better, and this is the long-term vision for some of the guys that are really big into Perf. They tell you their goal is to not have all these external tools. They want to start baking into the product. So I can show you these, right? And I have a list of these in the presentation, but I'll skip over it really. There's a lot of different performance monitoring tools here, and some of it's kind of interesting, like energy consumption. Well, if you're on like on a device that, you know, battery is a important factor, right? You might want to make sure that you're not doing operations that consume too much power. So yeah. So I'm just going to, for my option, I have Performance Wizard only, right? My target is the Perf Test console application, and I have a couple of different options here, right? Excuse me. Ooh. On the top, or on the bottom, I mean, I've got a start button, so I'm just going to start this guy. Now, because I chose the wizard, I've got to set up a couple of things. I can do CPU sampling, or I can do instrumentation, and instrumentation is going to, you know, add pretty much, it's like before and after every function call, right? And I'm going to be able to see how long functions took. But I can see that in different ways. But I'm just going to do CPU sampling. I want to target that project, and I'm going to launch it afterwards. Now, I noticed that depending on what I'm launching, I have different options through this performance wizard. So just keep that, just understand that, I guess. But simply, it's going to open up and spit out all this nonsense, and it's going to generally get slower as it goes. You might not even be able to notice this, right? That's one of the things with like performance analysis. You might think it's fast, right? But you got to be able to measure that, right? And then you'd be able to see if truly got an issue or not, you know. See how it's going. This is obviously noticeable. I'm hitting some bottleneck, you know. And well, I mean, I've done some dumb stuff in this application, so you know.
Where are your cookies?
Thanks for that. That's thinking outside of the box.
You never know. That doesn't have a clear tag.
I swear this is almost done. It's a good beer break. So now, see, it's loading some symbols. What's interesting, you have to, now if you go to like MSDN, there's a good article about beginning profiling, performance testing with profiling, right? Using the Visual Studio Profiler. It tells you the 3 things that you need to set up first. Real simple. It's like run as administrator, set up this in the debug tools, options, debugging, symbols path, right? And one other thing. But it's real simple to set up. And then I need to load these symbols because I want to be able to view the code and when I want to dive into it, right? Or when I'm looking at this. So, okay, good, you can see it. This graph shows wall clock time, how long that took a whole like minute to run, right? And this is the CPU percentage for this process over that time, right? So what's interesting, what I'm looking at here is I've got a drop down of a bunch of different views that I can look at, and I'll try to do a couple of these here in a minute. And then I've got my hot path, which I was talking about before. So my cryptography is an issue here. Now I'm kind of disappointed because I tried to fix this earlier. The symbol, this is what the meat of all this is, what you want to see is the symbols, right? And you can see actually the lines of code, right? And then it highlights all my hot path areas, my the larger percentage of execution methods or tasks in red, in different shades of red that show kind of like the varying level of like, you should probably look at that. Yeah, more samples got caught here. So maybe look at that, right? I think what that tells you is look at those pieces because you're spending the most time executing in that area. See if you're doing that right, or if I need to change something, or if maybe I should isolate that and try to run a benchmark on that, see if I can improve that little segment of code, right? But I apologize, I don't have that running there, but you can, if you set it up, I must not have set up something correctly, so there you go. But you can definitely you can see that and get a lot more insight in your application. And the last couple of things I want to show you is there's a call tree. You can start diving down into your application and the methods and lines and see where the samples gummed up, really. So in my AES encrypt method, see where a lot of these samples got hung up? This is crypto stream write. Or maybe it's, let's see. Yeah, see where inclusive samples? So this is where a lot of my samples were being stuck at, is this crypto stream.write. And I would see that in like really bright red, right? Larger percentage, I see like what, 88% next to that line in red. And if I had the symbol loaded, right? For whatever reason, the symbol's not loading. So that's, oh, one last thing, sorry, is that you can, there's this Performance Explorer. I can compare 2 samples to each other. So I can run 2 tests, and I can compare them and see if the change that I made was positive or negative. And there's small graphs that show, you can see the call tree and the individual lines and see if those meant a difference or not. But I'm not going to show that here. That's something I encourage you guys to run it a couple times, make a couple of tweaks, and see the difference. Okay, let me jump over because I really want to show. I'm almost at the end, and I really want to show you one of the cooler tools here. Okay, that's Profiler. There's a lot of performance reports you can get out of that. I showed you the list, right? Now this other tool called Perf View. This is where it's at. It helps, you can have it run an application, and then you can see a lot more detail of what I just saw, right? And then you can do memory dumps. You compare two memory dumps, right, to see if you have a memory leak, right? And you can do a lot more stuff. You can collect data machine-wide and then kind of filter it down. You can do something, collect, do something, stop collecting, and then see the difference, right? So in my limited time left, let me run through that. So this is a tool that is, again, not ugly, whatever, but it's actually written very well. It has a lot of help documentation, in fact, frequently asked questions inside of it. So where you start in the tutorials is right inside of this application. And they link to Channel 9 videos, and they're all done by this guy, Vance Morrison. This guy is awesome. Like, he geeks out about performance analysis so good. I don't say so bad, but so good. You just got to watch this guy talk about it. You can sense the enthusiasm he has in it, and then he's just insanely smart about what he's talking about. And yeah, it's just someone to look to in this space for stuff. But I have a couple options here. Under memory, I can take snapshots, right, of the running process, and I can compare those two and see difference in object sizes, right? Maybe I have, or maybe difference of number of objects that I have. So maybe I'm holding on to things too long or whatever. I just wanted to mention that. Underneath the collect, this is where you do the majority of your stuff. You can do the tutorial. That's what I'll run right now. You can go run, and you can say tutorial. It's going to output it to this ETL file. And then you can say I want the thread time. That's going to give you some of the timing between each of your methods. And there's all kinds of options. It gets really in-depth really quickly. But there's great tutorials on why you might want to do this. But that's what makes it a great tool, right? No, I know, right? So I'm going to run this tutorial. This is what you can do. All you need to do is download Perf, open it up, go to collect, run, and type in tutorial. And tutorial ships with this, right? So it helps you kind of start out, right, into using this tool. And all the videos and everything that Vance has done are based off of this tutorial application, and it just produces some nice data. Over on the left here, you can see I have one open. I have a lot of different things I can investigate here. And some of these are HTML reports. Some of them actually open up a dialog where I can choose the process that I want to look at, and then it'll go into like the call stack, the call tree, and then it has a lot of good information about the samples that will pass through it and where the samples were getting like gummed up, right? Okay, so that's done. Here's the one that just ran, and I can open like CPU stacks, right? Oh, it's opened up on this computer. Select process, select tutorial. This is probably going to open up over here too. Yep. So needs more UX love. That's fine. Actually, you'll kind of love this. This graph, this is a graph, and it's actually like if you think of a line graph, right? The underscores are nothing happened, and then it goes up by letter and number, and I think, and it goes up. No, seriously, there's a way you can interpret this. Seriously.
Like that's zero for like if you looked at it over time, it'd be like on the third one down, it'd be like.
So let me show you over time. You go to call tree, and then I can start diving into this.
Yeah.
Look at how. See, we're honing in. Lines going down the way. This is why I wish I wasn't at like the very end, timing wise. because this is the coolest tool, right? You can dive into a lot of stuff. You can see a lot of information here. Let's say like this spin. So you can look here. Here's your. So there's like some common terminology with Performance Monitor about included and excluded samples, right? You can see this first and last over here. It's like the sample and then the last one that came out. You can see where. Well, this is actually how I like to look at it, is this percentage, right? I'm hopping, quite a bit here. So like 13% of the samples are lost here. I can go into the spin for a second and go to source. And it opened up this window where it says I'm doing some date time now math and or logic checking, right? And it's not something's wrong, right? But this helps you narrow down a little bit where the samples are and what line of code, and then I can go and view the code. Just right click, view code. Again, I have to have the symbols, right, or else I can't view the code for that piece. This shows just my app or just my code, which is like leaving out a lot of the I just want to see my app, right? That's in layman's terms how I can put it, right? It's going to leave out a lot of like the what does it take to make system or datetime.toString, right? It's going to leave out some of that stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to look in this, and I would highly suggest there's a 10-part series on Channel 9 about Perfmon. There's actually two of them, two 10-part series. I don't know why there's two of them, but there's one with 3 guys. I'll get the link on this. They do an excellent job of showing CPU, memory, all these different types of analysis of this application and how you go about like understanding if you have a problem. So yeah, I'm about right there. So all right, so I'll close this. All right, so what's new for Visual Studio in 2015 for Perf? There's a new diagnostics window. There's some helpful UI helpers, right? When you're looking at the diagnostics window to help you kind of understand when you're paused and when things are maybe CPU is low because disk is high or something like that, right? There's some helpful indicators there. There's new and improved IntelliTrace, right? So IntelliTrace is going to be a little bit easier to read. I've got some screenshots I'll show you. And then you can take snapshots right in your process. You can just say, take snapshot pretty quickly. Take snapshot, tell you the difference, the deltas. And then there's perf tips. So what I was showing before where it's like system.diagnostics.stopwatch and start and stop. When you're debugging, that's included, right? And they also factor out the time that it takes, like when you're spinning up a stopwatch, right? When you're saying start, it's not going to have any of that start time in it, right? And maybe if you paused on a line, it's not going to have the time that when you paused. It's going to be the time it took to execute from line to line, right? So they built it knowing they don't want you to fall into the pitfall of I've got to quickly step through my code to get the right execution number. It's like it'll smartly show you the calculation. All right, so 5 minutes, 4 minutes left, 3 minutes. Oh boy, this is not a good picture for this. This in general is the output window, right? So we have debugger events. I might have a breakpoint here. You can see I've got memory, CPU utilization, and here's some of what's going on in the debugger. Let's go forward because I've got some more stuff to show. Some helpful highlighting and UI magic to make your debugging experience a little easier. Take snapshot. It's this big button, take snapshot, right? You can see there's your baseline and your second snapshot. You can see, I've got maybe more objects or less objects. And then you can even dive into these snapshots and see where are the problems. Like, am I hanging on to things too long, or am I generating too many? That kind of stuff. Here's the, I can't quite see it. Oh, here it is. Here's that perf tips when as you're stepping through lines of code. You can see took it most as many milliseconds. And what's cool, and I'm sure you guys know this, but it blew my mind. The guy was dragging and dropping the what you call that, the instruction pointer. He was like dragging and dropping it, playing, dragging and dropping it, playing. He was like, oh, I changed that line of code, and it saved about that much, drag and drop. So he was getting kind of his own little, like, he wasn't like recording it down, he was getting a mean, right? So you could get an average. I'm just showing some more images here of what kind of new tools you're going to get. So some of my lessons learned: make sure you're running in release mode. Yep, I've done that before. You don't want to load the symbols sometimes when you're taking if you're in like a performance testing environment, you want to get a true number. Like, don't load the symbols with your stuff. Run it on light production hardware. It takes a lot of time to set up this stuff and capture everything and analyze it. So you need, like, if you're estimating time for performance, there's no, I don't know, calculation you could do, but you're going to want to, keep in mind that it takes a long time. We spent, I don't know what, it's a process. It takes a week or two, depending, and it just depends, right? And then you can you can take production, memory dumps and production and your PT environment, but make sure you like throttling what you're doing, right? So you could, there's a couple of tools I'll show you. Like one called proc dump. You can actually throttle how much it's actually, and if you can actually say I'm in production right now. So there's a few. They realize, so there might be some hesitation to using some of this stuff in production, and you can, flip some bits in some places and make it, a little safer. A couple of these. So, and then one issue I was showing you guys where I had, or the one diagram in perfmod where the exception count was rising, and I didn't quite know what exception it was. Well, I can figure this out by taking a memory dump, and I can do that with this debug diag too, which is really nice. I can say when my exception count gets above a certain number, right, then take a memory dump. And that's really useful because it's kind of like it's a reactive way, right? This thing happened, this threshold happened, take a dump, and then I want to inspect that memory dump, right? So there's this really, they call it wind bag, right? It's like wind debug. You can analyze that dump file. You can actually go in and look and see what the type of exception you're seeing. It's very, very cool stuff. That's how we actually found out I was getting like, this was in SharePoint, right? So every time I was trying to read a list item in SharePoint, it would make this other listening process was saying the current logged in user doesn't have access to this other database to log it, right? Well, I was every time trying to read this SharePoint list item, it was generating tons of exceptions, right? Well, I found out what user it was because the whole trace was, stack trace was in that, in memory for me to look at. Went right it, gave my user permissions, right? And all of a sudden ran the perf test again, and just everything leveled out. It's really nice. It's just cool to see how analyzing that and kind of help solve it. There's also Windows Performance Analyzer. You'll see a lot of this. This is kind of a nice graphical user interface to looking at some of your logs. And then Azure Diagnostics, kind of I only put a link, I didn't put a link up here, but this is a lot of the methods that I'm showing you in concepts apply to Azure, but the tooling might be different. So that's something I want to start diving into. That's just kind of an interesting concept. I've got all kinds of resources here, all the tools that I used. There's the download links. There's this guy, Vance Morrison. I really suggest just watch one video of this guy and you'll see what I'm talking about, how enthused this guy is. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got. So thanks, everybody.
Alrighty.
fun real quick. Randomly select who our winner is. All right, number 5.
And that is a speaker. You get your choice of Dirty Frank's gift card, Starbucks, or some free philosophers from Home